On the channel, I love to take a look at a certain position group from a certain year in terms of recruiting and see how they've done. Back in 2019, there were a bunch of big-time wide receivers, but unfortunately, most of them did not end up working out. In today's video, I want to take a look at the top 10 wide receiver recruits from the class of 2019, go through who they were, where they ended up, and how they've ended up doing. Unfortunately, the 2019 class was not very good, but before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's go ahead and get started and talk about the top 10 wide receiver recruits. So at number 10 in the class of 2019, 24/7 Sports Composite had Jeremiah Payton, a wide receiver from Duncan Fletcher High School located in Neptune Beach, Florida. Honestly, I had not heard a lot about Jeremiah Payton until making today's video, and he just didn't end up doing a whole lot while he was there. While he was solid coming out of the state of Florida, scouts were in love with his athleticism and thought he would translate to the college game. Payton ultimately decided to commit to the Miami Hurricanes and right away became the most hyped up guy in that class. In his first season with Jarren Williams as the quarterback, Payton would catch one pass for 23 yards. Things would not get any better in 2020, as with Garrett King at quarterback, he caught 5 passes for 35 yards. Payton never caught a touchdown pass in his 2 years at Miami, and then he would decide to transfer. He'd also taken some sort of leave of absence, and while it looks like he ended up going to Alabama A&M, but it looks like he never saw the field there, and then played for the Jacksonville Sharks of the Indoor Football League. That was back in 2024, and unfortunately, Payton had everything on paper but just never delivered. And number 9 in the 24/7 Sports Composite, we have Joseph Enada. He's a guy I've actually done a full-length video on the channel, but Enada never ended up panning out either. Coming out of Folsom High School in California, Enada was one of the top receiver recruits in the class of 2019, and at one point, he was actually listed as a 5-star on some other sites. For his high school career, he had 188 catches for 3,682 yards and 59 touchdowns. He also won 39 of his 42 career games and had a touchdown in 36 of them. He had a ridiculous amount of hype when he arrived at Clemson, but unfortunately Enada was just never able to put it all together while he was there. In 2019, he caught 17 passes for 240 yards and 3 touchdowns, did very minimal in 2020, and then in 2021 and 2022, he was just okay. He ended up combining for about 64 catches for about 1,000 yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 years, but he never really got past being a role player. Sure, I wouldn't necessarily call him a super bust, but he wasn't a star either. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. He ended up signing with the Philadelphia Eagles after the 2022 season, and he signed with the Birmingham Stallions of the UFL, and he'll probably try to work his way back up to the NFL someday. For now though, Enada was underwhelming. And number 8, we have a guy who had a very interesting story, and that was Jake Smith, as he came out of Notre Dame Prep, which was located in Scottsdale, Arizona. Jake Smith is a little bit different than the rest of the guys on this list, as he was just absolutely absurd in high school. In total, his junior season, he had 2,600 all-purpose yards, and as a senior, he had 2,400 all-purpose yards. This guy was dominant for years while he was in the state of Arizona, and ended up deciding to commit to play for Texas over USC, Bama, Ohio State, Clemson, and Texas A&M. Smith was sort of seen as a do-it-all athlete, but after a hot start in 2019 at Texas, he was never able to get better. He had 25 catches for 274 yards and 6 touchdowns in 2019, then had 23 catches for 294 yards and 3 touchdowns in 2020. It all looked really good for Jake, but then he decided to transfer to USC. He then missed the 2021 season due to a foot injury, and then was no longer on the roster. He sat out of 2022, and then went back home to play for Arizona State, but was denied eligibility. He had a whole saga at the end of his career, and Jake Smith should have never left. He finished with 6 catches for 91 yards at ASU back in 2024, and now his career is over. Not quite sure what he's doing, but I don't think he's in the NFL. At number 7, we had our second Clemson receiver on the list, and that was Frank Ladson Jr. out of South Dade High School, which was located in Miami, Florida. Ladson was one of those names I heard about for quite some time, and going back in time, he ended up having 50 catches for 1,200 yards and 13 touchdowns as a senior, and became one of the best receivers in all of high school football. The Clemson Tigers really wanted him, and eventually he would decide to commit there. Him and Enada were both hyped up, but Ladson was worse than Joe was. In 2019, Frank caught 9 passes for 128 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then in 2020, he caught 18 for 281 and 3 touchdowns. It was alright, And in 2021, he only ended up having 4 catches before he would decide to transfer over to the Miami Hurricanes. In 2022 at the Canes, he ended up catching 27 passes for 298 yards and 1 touchdown before transferring once again to UMass. I guess he never ended up playing or anything because he never recorded a single stat while he was there, and I can't really figure out what the heck happened. But either way, Ladson had a whirlwind of a career and never ended up panning out for being the number 7 overall receiver recruit. At number 6, the composite had wide receiver Kyle Ford, a player from Orange Lutheran High School located in California. Kyle Ford has one of the more heartwarming stories on this list, as going back in time, he obviously was a huge recruit like the rest of these guys, as he blew up his first couple years of high school before catching 29 passes for 456 yards and 7 touchdowns before having a season-ending knee injury. This would totally put him behind the 8 ball going into his college career, and he ended up signing to play for USC. USC obviously always develops a lot of receivers, but Ford got off to a slow start. He caught 1 pass in 2019, didn't play in 2020, and then had 19 catches for 2 touchdowns in 2021. In 2022, he also caught 20 passes for 2 touchdowns before transferring over to UCLA. During Ford's 1 year over there, he caught 22 passes for 200 yards and 1 touchdown before deciding to come back to USC for his final year of eligibility. This past season, Ford had a career-high 26 catches for 317 yards and 3 touchdowns, and I believe he caught the game-winning touchdown pass in their bowl game, which made him super emotional and was the icing on the cake to his career. He's sort of like Enada, where I would not say he was a bust, but he didn't live up to the hype either. I know Ford ended up getting an invite to go to the Las Vegas Raiders, but I'm not sure if he's going to make the roster or even get on a practice squad. Either way, he overcame a lot, and that is what happened to Kyle Ford. Before we get into our last 5 players on the list, be sure to go down to the comment section below and let me know which year or position group I should do my next feature on. So number 5, we had Dominic Bllelock, a player from Walton High School located in Marietta, Georgia. I've been hearing about Dominic Bllelock for quite some time. As going back to his high school days, some believed he was a 5-star as he ended up catching 60 passes for 1,052 yards and 8 touchdowns during his senior season. Bllelock was productive for 3 of his 4 years of high school football and had more than 3,500 yards and 52 touchdowns. He decided to stay home and play for the Georgia Bulldogs, and he was hyped up to be one of the next big things there. As a freshman, Bllelock caught 18 passes for 310 yards and 5 touchdowns, and it looked like his best football was still yet to come. Fortunately, that would sort of be his peak. He caught 2 passes in 2021, didn't play in 2020, and then back in 2022, he ended up with 15 catches for 227 yards and a touchdown. Through his 4 years at Georgia, he unfortunately did not pan out, and he would transfer to Georgia Tech in 2023. In his 1 season with the Jackets, Bllelock would end up catching 21 passes for 337 yards and 2 touchdowns. As I said, his best season was as a freshman, but those knee injuries in the middle of his career did not help him out. He declared for the 2024 NFL Draft, but did not end up making an active roster. Bllelock is sort of like Kyle Ford, where those injuries really did not help him, but he still goes down as underwhelming. At number 4, we get our first guy who actually lived up to the hype on the list, and that is George Pickens. I've been hearing about Pickens for quite some time too, as he was a 5-star recruit and the number 4 receiver in the nation, and Pickens went to Hoover High School, which was located in Alabama. He had a very interesting high school career, as he ended up having 69 catches for 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns as a senior, and originally would decide to commit to Auburn. I think there was some controversy that went on there, but eventually he would flip to Georgia, and this was a huge get for the Georgia Bulldogs. Pickens would end up living up to the hype while he was at Georgia, as despite being at a school that isn't the most pass catcher friendly, he caught 49 passes for 729 yards and 8 touchdowns as a freshman. As a sophomore, he caught 36 passes for 513 yards and 6 touchdowns before unfortunately he would battle an injury in 2021, and his knee ended up getting him. It wasn't great, but Pickens would declare for the 2022 NFL Draft, where he was taken with the 52nd overall pick in the 2nd round by the Pittsburgh Steelers. So far during his NFL career, Pickens will now be on his 2nd team, as in 3 years at Pittsburgh, he caught 174 passes for 2,800 yards and 12 touchdowns. Pickens is now on the Dallas Cowboys, and we'll see how he can do. He's the only player on this list so far who actually lived up to the hype, and hopefully he has a good season in 2025. At number 3, we have a guy who I'm super familiar with, as we have former Missouri Tiger Theo Whis Jr. I've done a full spotlight on him on the channel before, but coming out of Allen High School in Texas, Whis was ranked as the number 3 receiver in the nation and the 21st overall player. Whis ended up putting up huge numbers while he was in high school, as he had over 1,000 yards receiving and 18 total touchdown passes. He would decide to commit to Oklahoma, following a couple of other players in the class as well, but unfortunately, Whis was never able to really get things going at Oklahoma. He caught 8 passes as a freshman before actually having his best season in 2020. He caught 37 passes for 530 yards and 4 touchdowns, and it looked like in 2021, he would probably be their top option. Unfortunately, he'd play in one game in 2021 due to a foot injury he suffered in the first matchup, and this definitely set him back. He fell behind the 8 ball, and after a poor season in 2022 in which he only caught 19 passes, he transferred over to Mizzou. He became the second receiver to Luther Burden while he was at Missouri, and in 2023, Whis caught 49 passes for 682 yards and 6 touchdowns. This past season, you could actually argue he became Brady Cook's #1 target, finishing with 60 receptions for 884 yards and 4 touchdowns. In his 5 years of college football, Whis caught 173 passes for 2,600 yards and 20 touchdowns. He declared for the 2025 NFL Draft, but ended up going undrafted. Still though, he landed with the Miami Dolphins, and apparently he has been turning heads. I'm not sure if he's going to make the roster, but I think he's going to be a practice squad player, and I definitely wouldn't consider him a bust either. Was he as good as George Pickens? No. But was he a productive college player who ended up becoming a star? Yes. And number 2, we have without a doubt our best player on the list today, and that is Garrett Wilson. Going back in time, he was a 5-star recruit from Lake Travis High School, and he was the next great Ohio State wide receiver. Wilson put up really good numbers while he was at Lake Travis, as he had over 1,200 yards and 19 touchdowns his senior year. In total, he had over 200 catches for 3,400 yards and 55 touchdowns, and the 5-star decided to go over to Ohio State. In Wilson's 3 seasons in Columbus, he was quite productive. He was part of that monster receiving core, and he caught 143 total passes for 2,200 yards and 23 touchdowns. His best season came in 2021, finishing with 70 receptions for 1,000 yards and 12 scores, and he declared for the 2022 NFL Draft, and like Pickens, he went pretty high. He was taken with the 10th overall pick in the first round by the New York Jets, and so far in his career, Garrett Wilson has lived up to the hype. He's had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons, and in total also has 14 touchdowns. He has 279 catches despite subpar quarterback play, and Wilson's one of the better young receivers in the NFL, and 100% lived up to his 5-star status. And finally at number 1, we had a player who was supposed to be better than all these guys, and that was Jadon Haselwood. Coming out of Atlanta, Georgia, Haselwood went to Cedar Grove High School and was considered a prodigy. This guy was supposed to do everything, as he had over 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns during his junior season, and eventually he chose to go to Oklahoma over Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee. He was part of that 3-headed monster that included Theo Whis and Trajan Bridges, but Haselwood never ended up living up to the hype while he was at Oklahoma either. In 2019, Jadon caught 19 passes for 272 yards and a touchdown, but unfortunately, injuries piled up. In 2020, he missed the first 6 games of the season, leading him to only catch 4 passes. In 2021, his role would increase again, playing in pretty much every game, finishing with 39 catches for 399 yards and 6 touchdowns, but he would decide to transfer ahead of the 2022 season. He would opt to go to the Arkansas Razorbacks, and in his 1 year there, he was actually pretty good. He caught 59 passes for 700 yards and 3 touchdowns, and while those stats don't exactly pop off the page, for Arkansas it's pretty good, as they don't typically have 1,000-yard receivers. While he's not Isaac T-Slaw or Treylon Burks, he was still pretty solid. In total, he had 121 catches for 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns, and I know Haselwood made an attempt to go off to the NFL, but I don't believe he ever landed on an active roster. He was the final guy in the class, and he's sort of like Theo Whis. He was a star on his team, but never ended up being elite. So yeah, when you take a look back at that 2019 class, we had 2 guys get drafted in George Pickens and Garrett Wilson, 2 guys who ended up becoming stars in Jadon Haselwood and Theo Whis Jr., some guys who had some injuries like Dominic Bllelock and Kyle Ford, and then the rest of them were just sort of tragic. Payton never stepped foot on the field, Enada and Ladson were underwhelming, and Jake Smith just had a tragedy. But what do you guys think? What do you think of this 2019 receiver group? Which year should I do next? And what other topics should I cover on the channel? Be sure to let me know down below, leave a like if you support today's video, subscribe if you're new, and check out one of the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.